Okay, guys, so I'm sure you've heard of the hysteria surrounding the EPA lifting a ban on chemicals in the drinking water. It's actually only two chemicals, and I'm going to be looking at my notes, so just bear with me. So let's be clear, the EPA limits more than 90 hazardous chemicals in drinking water. We could argue that they could limit a lot more, but they currently only limit 90. And they do so based on what they think will affect, what contaminants will affect human health. Um, I like Trump on the whole. I'm liking him less as time goes by because he's proving himself to be a bigger pushover than I would have hoped. But with that said, it's interesting that it's being called Trump's EPA when they're deciding to do this. We know that Trump is for business. He's going to deregulate everything if he can. We'll all just be living in a third world country because it'll make money. And the rich are only worried about themselves, like they can purify their water. So I think that's kind of his mindset, and nobody should be surprised by that. But I do want to just kind of back away from the hysteria because a lot of these chemicals you're going to be exposed to anyway, and like drinking water is the least of your concerns when it comes to them. I'm not saying that the limits should be abolished. I'm just saying that you're eating this stuff every day. So I don't know if this has been officially confirmed or not, but essentially there are going to be two chemicals that are going to have their limits abolished. That's going to be PFOA and PFOS. Now I'm going to try to put on my scientific hat here and butcher the pronunciation of these, but PFOA is perfluorocatanoic, and it's a man-made chemical. So PFOA is essentially not actually in the Teflon. It is a chemical that's used so that the Teflon is easier to work with in the factory. And so they claim that it's not in the Teflon, so that means it could be trace amounts. It could be so small that they consider it undetectable. You know how the law works. Like it could be in there, but it's under an amount that they can say it's not in there. Essentially, they claim it's all burned off in the process. And in that process, it essentially contaminates the water source. And so if you like nonstick pots and pans, that's why 98% of Americans have this chemical in their bodies. And I guess at this point, the EPA is like, why regulate it? And that's kind of where they're standing. Now, the partner to this chemical, which is PFOS, let me make sure I have it right. I literally don't want to try to pronounce this, but I will. Perfluorotennisulfonic is essentially used in Scotchgard. It's been banned in a lot of places, but clearly not here in the US. So that's the other chemical, PFOS, that they want to just kind of lift the limits on. So, what could this mean? I think it could mean that the limits are getting so out of control that they won't be able to produce their products anymore if they keep on limiting it. Like, how can we actually keep the water that clean? I would argue that there are a whole lot of things that we should be limiting and we should be clearing out of our water supply that we aren't clearing out of our water supply. Perfluorinated chemicals are actually a bit of a problem. Michigan literally just declared a state of emergency last year because they had a town. Let me see if I can find the name of the town. Parchment, Michigan. They were given free bottled water because their pipes needed to be flushed because the concentrations of these two chemicals were so high in their water supply, it was unsafe for them to drink. Now, these chemicals are tied to all sorts of nasty things, problems with the liver, cancer, you name it, they're tied to it. And that's essentially why we have regulated them so heavily. With the regulations lifted, I guess every place is going to be like this little town in Michigan where we're just all going to just be open to, being sick. But I think that it's interesting that, on the heels of a state of emergency being declared because there was too much of these chemicals in a water supply, that the EPA is going to lift them. Again, though, I double back to what I was saying about Trump. which is that he's pro business. And so if this will allow businesses to come in and do the work they need to do, he's going to let them in, and we're going to live in a third world country. Everybody has seen a documentary, right, where there's been a third world country with filthy water that people can't drink out of, that's steaming and is multicolored. And that'll be the US if we allow it. So, with that said, it's not like the EPA is deregulating standards for all chemicals, but it's definitely deregulating the standards for these two chemicals. I feel like it's being reported a lot of different ways. The thing is this, people, we're either going to put the reins on these factories or we're not. I'm not for mass production. It's pollutive, just period. It wastes resources, it's pollutive. It panders to a culture where you consume, and throw things away that are low quality items. And it is what it is. Why we can't just all use, stainless steel dinnerware, I don't know. But if we enjoy the convenience of non-stick, then we're going to enjoy the convenience of being poisoned. If we're going to enjoy the convenience of products like Scotchgard, then we're going to have to take the consequences of that, which is that our environment is going to be heavily polluted. There's just no way around it. We seem to want our cake and we want to eat it too, and it just cannot happen. If you want the cake, you're going to take the poison along with it. It just is the way the world works. And I think a lot of this accountability has to fall on our shoulders. There are so many things that they don't regulate at all. I mean, 90 chemicals is nothing in the grand scheme of what's used. And so I think we have to consider that too. There's so much that we could regulate outside of these 90 chemicals, outside of these two chemicals that are going to be deregulated, but that we don't regulate at all. But the reality is, with the convenience that we have, the pop up houses, the consumer culture, things like that, this is part of the deal. We've made a deal with the devil, and part of the deal is that our environment is going to be polluted. You can't have the convenience and not get the contaminants. It's just not possible. And I think it's about time we grow up and we realize that. And I'll talk to you guys later.